You're tuning into the Active Mom Podcast with physical therapist Dr. Carrie Pagliano, a real mom's guide to all things postpartum return to workouts after baby. If you're a postpartum mom, coach, trainer, or physical therapist looking for answers on how to get back to running, CrossFit, yoga, Pilates, HIIT, you name it, without the fear of pelvic floor issues or doing something wrong, this is the podcast for you. Let's start the show. All right. So not often do we get authors on the show. We have author Kate Edwards. She's written a couple of books, but author of Racing Heart and Go Ahead, Stop and Pee. Also a physical therapist and CEO of a lot of different things. I'll let her dive into that. But friend of the show, Kate Edwards. Thanks for being on the Active Mom Postpartum Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Carrie. I'm excited to be here.
Now, you and I think we're similar vintage as far as PTs. How long have you been a PT?
So I don't exactly know, but it's around.
Okay, so we're similar.
So we're similar. So I think I've been out. Someone who went to school with me will probably know better than I will, but somewhere between, I've been treating people for like 13 to 15 years because it was my second career.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah. So I actually was in marketing, which is hilarious before.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So I've been in that, but vintage wise, our kids are similar age. You have a fourth grader. You have a long running history, and that was a little bit in your Racing Heart book. Dive into that a little bit so people kind of have a bit of your background.
Sure, absolutely. So I have run 13 marathons and 3 Boston marathons. I've done several triathlons, and I can't count how many half marathons, all that stuff. So I've done a lot of races, and I did for a very long time. Running was one of those things for me that helped relieve stress, helped me to, I think, really become who I am today. And it was such an integral part of my life. It was the fabric, and still is in the fabric of my life. But when so my son is 9 now. So when he was 1 year old, I went out for a run, and it was just a typical 5-mile run. I was training for a half Ironman, and I was running, and I didn't feel very good. And I kept pushing myself harder and harder, even though I knew better. I ended up running as fast as I could for my last half mile. And the moment I stopped, my heart rate went from 150 to 200 to 250 to 300. And then my Garmin went blank. And I was in ventricular tachycardia, which is an arrhythmia, which means that your heart is beating all over the place, and it's not settling down, and it's very dangerous. So ventricular tachycardia is often what causes sudden death. And so I sat on my front steps because I didn't want to go into my house. I was afraid my family would find me dead when they got home. And then somehow I converted back to a regular heart rhythm. I worked on breathing. I have no idea if that's why, or if it was just my luck. But I converted back to a regular heartbeat. And that was not the first time that happened, but it was the first time that I paid attention. The other times that it had happened, I'd passed out in a couple of marathons previously. I went to cardiologist, and the cardiologist told me not to worry about it. I was healthy. It was just dehydration. But in fact, they just kept missing it. And so all in all, I ended up being diagnosed a year later. It took them a year because it was so rare, with a genetic heart disease called ARVC, arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy. And the only thing that makes it worse is exercise. So it was the cumulative years of exercise and the amount of exercise and the intensity of exercise that turned the gene on for me. So it was a really hard transition. I do run now once a week for 2 to 2.5 miles because it was negotiated hard with my cardiologist. And I walk a lot, and I do strength training 3 times a week, and I do yoga and Pilates, all the stuff. So I do exercise. It's not that I don't, but I no longer can run 50 miles or cycle or swim, which was definitely my lifestyle. And it was something I think I still grieve periodically because of my life. I'm a running medicine physical therapist, and I work with the Atlanta Track Club elite team, Olympians. I I'm in charge of a trail race. I have couple companies that are running related. So it's very interesting that I can't really run that much anymore, but I've learned a lot.
Yeah, no, oh my goodness, that's quite the story if people aren't familiar with that. The thing that just stuck in my head, because I don't think I realized the timeline when all this was going on with a 1-year-old.
Yeah. So that was the thing that got me is I actually thought the way that I was feeling, felt bad. I was running half marathons when I was pregnant,
Mhm.
and it was the only thing that helped me not throw up.
Oh my goodness, really?
Yeah, so
Wow.
the longer I ran, the less throwing up I did. So I just kept running. And but I was so tired throughout pregnancy. And I kept asking people, is this normal? Is this normal?
Right,
And they kept saying, you're pregnant. Of course you're tired. But I was falling
right.
asleep with my clothes on after work at 4 o'clock. But we didn't know it wasn't normal. And then when I had my son, I was so tired all of the time. Um, I was going to sleep at 7 p.m. It was just the amount of fatigue was so high. And I kept asking, is this normal? Is this normal? And people kept saying yes, but it wasn't. It was absolutely
Right.
not normal. And the way that I was feeling, I would get really dizzy sometimes. It was all because my heart, through pregnancy, it actually aggravated my heart even more. And then on top of it, I was running these long distance during pregnancy. And then I started training for a half Ironman. So all of that together was just a recipe for disaster.
Just too much. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I mean, now that this, I mean, you're 9 years out from delivery. I mean, in the rear view, knowing that you understand kind of this a little bit more, were there signs as a younger runner, were there signs in pregnancy, like for understanding that this is rare as well?
Yeah.
Like looking in the rear view, what are the thoughts that you have?
Well, there's a lot I know now because also, of course, the way that I am, the way you are, I studied it. So, I studied it, but also from an experience lens. The amount of fatigue is absolutely abnormal. If
Yeah.
you ever pass out during exercise, you have to have a cardiac screen.
That's sad.
That is the number one. So my sports cardiologist, who's like one of the number one sports cardiologists in the country, probably the world, honestly, he says that if you pass out in exercise, it is most likely cardiac.
Mhm.
You should get it checked. Not always. And it's not what I have necessarily. There's a whole bunch of different things it could be.
Okay.
But that would be the number one sign because I passed out in 3 marathons. I actually ran the Philadelphia Marathon. I saw that I was about to qualify for Boston for the first time. I completely blacked out, lost control of my bowels. I remember that 2 people were holding me up underneath my arms. And they said, if you don't cross on your feet, it doesn't count. So I have pictures of myself. I do not remember any of this with my arms in the air, crossing in victory. I woke up in the medical tent with a whole bunch of doctors around me. I was hooked up to an EKG, everything. But I don't remember a lot of it. And I went and saw a cardiologist after that and they still didn't find anything.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, and you did all the right things. You're like, I know this is wrong. This is not how it's supposed to go. And you go ask somebody,
Yeah.
oh my gosh.
They just
So
have
how many times do you have to pass out in a marathon, but before somebody pays attention?
That's why if you ever pass out during exercise, find a sports cardiologist, not just a regular cardio.
Mm.
Um, they as athletes, our hearts look different anyway.
Yeah.
And so there are certain things with athletes that you would expect that someone who didn't understand the athletic heart wouldn't necessarily understand. And so so my problem is I saw 3 cardiologists that were not sports cardiologists.
Yeah.
But I would also like to give a shout out to my EP because he's the one, he's not a sports cardiologist, but he is an electrophysiologist and he's the one that pushed me in all my tests. He was the first person to say, like, you've passed all the tests. Can you make it come on? And I said, oh yeah, no one ever asked me to do that before. And so I got on the treadmill and to this day, he says he's never been more terrified in his life. I said, I'm going to sprint now. And I was like at I think it was under 7-minute mile with the incline all the way up.
Mhm.
And I went into VTAC. And I didn't feel it. I didn't know I was in VTAC. And he's like yelling, "Stop the treadmill, get her off."
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I didn't know.
You weren't feeling it at all.
I felt nothing.
That's amazing that you're just your system's like, yeah, no, we're good. It's all fine.
Yeah, I felt
And
nothing.
mildly disturbing. Oh my God.
It's totally disturbing.
So the other thing I'm thinking when you're saying this is it's almost like a parallel conversation about, and we'll get to this part, is postpartum and pregnancy and training in pregnancy and all that stuff, because there's a lot and doing research, because a lot of research entities won't allow you to go past certain heart rates when working with
Right.
pregnant women. And that's not where people function who are in professional sports. And so, I mean, you're semi-elite, I think, at this point. If you're going to go major incline and do that kind of pace, like
Yeah.
we've got to study people where they actually function, and they weren't studying you where you were functioning.
No, and that's why they missed it.
Holy cow.
And so now, I mean, I've worked with pregnant elite runners. And so because I've been there, and again, I
Yeah.
was not elite. I was just fast for my, for my age group. I was not elite.
Take some credit here, okay? You're a fast runner, okay?
But no, I've worked with a lot of elites, and I can think of one in particular that went through pregnancy, and she had no guidance. Nobody
No, they
knew
don't.
nobody knew what to tell her.
No.
So luckily, I had been through the journey, and I had, written the book with our mutual friend Blair,
Yeah.
and done a ton of research about it. And I was treating women who were running through pregnancy, and so we were able to get through it. And she did great, but there are no resources. I mean, there's a lot more now. I don't want to say no resources. Like, you're a great resource. There's a lot of women that are really good resources now, but at the time there weren't.
Well, and I think that brings about a good point. And I mean, and this is what I wonder too, is, people couldn't recognize that you were an athlete, even worse, that you were a female athlete at that point. So how much gaslighting was going on there? But at the same time, like, where do you go? You're trying to do everything to check the boxes and do everything right. And I think that's a very similar conversation with professional athletes. We assume that professional athletes always have the best information. And I find that it's far from the truth. I'm fortunate. I have colleagues that, are in pro sports, and the stories I hear are,
Carrie,
oh,
so that's one of the reasons, and we'll talk about it later, I've created Run Source and Fast Bananas, is because I actually also assumed that professional athletes had the support that they needed. I assumed it was just people like us that didn't have the support we needed.
right.
But what actually is true is that nobody has the support that they
No.
need. And in terms of building a multidisciplinary team of experts that actually understand what's happening to the female body, how hormones impact the female body, how pregnancy, postpartum impact it, and how long it impacts it. It's not over when the baby comes out.
No.
There are all these pieces that have just kind of been all over the place and not put together for so long.
Yep.
And it really does start from the top down. I mean, it's great that now we're having conversations and acknowledging that professional athletes are pregnant, but we're only acknowledging that professional athletes are pregnant. We're still not really supporting them.
Well, and that's the part, again, I feel like you're in a good place to have this conversation, because it's like multifactorial. So on one hand, there's those of us that are like, hey, this has been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think there's also this general lack of awareness. Like, Christine, you just put out Up to Speed in the spring, basically looking at the history of, hey, we didn't have great equity in, research period, looking at women. We didn't have women researchers, kind of all this other stuff. And then great. Now that everybody starts to understand, we have this like female athlete boom.
Yeah.
And we have this so many more moms that are like, okay, I want to try and make a go of this. But they all just navigated the dumpster fire that was even getting paid, while they were being pregnant, not hiding all this. It was like, I feel like we're just getting shot at from like so many different directions, but we're all coming to the same place of like dumpster fire, looking ahead that there's a double dumpster fire from perimenopause and menopause.
Oh my God. I know.
You and I are both just like, oh shit, we got to do this again.
I know.
Like,
Now I'm like, okay, I wrote the book because it was happening and no, there were no resources. Now I've got to write another book.
I know. I was like, okay, we can't just like sit for a minute. I just got off, and you would appreciate this too. I just got off with Margot Kwiatkowski. She's postpartum prolapse on Instagram, and she's been out of school like probably since 19 or something. And so she was telling me all these things that like, hey, this is when I started. This is what we did with pelvic floor, and I'm like, dude, you don't even understand. Like, you just skipped ahead, like, and knocked out the first like 18 years of my career and just started there. And I'm like, I'm really happy for you, but I have a lot of FOMO because
I
I'm a little
know.
tired from the last revolution.
Right? It's so true. It's like, okay. And I mean, I feel very grateful that I have had the knowledge and the support of my peers and
Mhm.
people to be able to like help with these waves.
Yeah,
But it's tiring. It's a lot of work.
it's a lot of work. No, sorry about it. Like, I'm not complaining, and I'm
No,
not the
me
old
neither.
biddy either. But do you have any FOMO? Do you have any like, knowing what I know now? Would you go back and like, even would you, if you knew about your heart and your genetics, what you know now, would you have done the same thing?
I would have done some things differently. I would have
Like what?
definitely run anyway. But
Of
in
course you
fact,
would.
and in fact, I swear to God, my son saved my life because I think I would have said, you know what, guys, I don't care. I'm running anyway if I didn't have a child.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure because my identity is so tied and always
Yes.
has been so tied to running that I can now, but I couldn't imagine a world without it.
Yes.
And so, but I had my son, and so it was perfect timing. Thank you, universe, because um, the love for your children makes you do a lot of things. And I was
Right.
willing to, in fact, when they wanted to put a defibrillator in, I have an implanted defibrillator. I said no, and I went to Mexico.
Okay. Okay.
I, I
Avoidance.
Right, totally. I wasn't ready, but at that point, I had been poked and prodded for a year. People didn't know what's wrong with me. I was so mad and like upset that all these people were making decisions for me. I wasn't deciding what was
Mm,
happening to my own body, which again, we can bring parallels to being pregnant and postpartum all over the place with that. Like all these people telling you what to do, and you have no authority on who you are. I just fled, and then I came back and I did it, but I needed it to be on my terms. And I needed it to be in a way that I could process mentally and emotionally. So, yes, I would still run if I knew this was going to happen. I probably wouldn't have been a crazy person and run, hill repeats over and over and over again because they're my favorite for an hour in the heat. I probably wouldn't have, tried to gotten up at 5 a.m. and only run sprint workouts with the boys because they were the only ones that could keep up with me. Like I wouldn't have done all those things because part of it that brings the gene on is intensity.
yeah.
I would have probably run, I don't know, because maybe this is a lie because of my personality, but like I think maybe I would have run, 5 miles 3 times a week so I could do it for my whole life.
Yeah.
Probably not though.
That- well, and I'm sitting here smiling because like, I love to run, have run my entire life. I do not sit here and be like, oh, I adore hill repeats. It's like, no, that's not my jam. So you're kind of next level. So when they're going back and doing your genetic profile, if they could find where that gene got activated with you, that would probably shed a lot of light. But I think I think a lot of people who are runners who are listening to this are like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's me. Like if I can't do my thing, then what's the point?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's such an interesting parallel. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, oh my God, mentally understanding this is 9 years ago and mental health is still like stigma in
Mhm.
postpartum.
Yeah.
You're trying to navigate postpartum, a toddler, you're a business person at this point, you're trying to navigate cardiac health and getting gaslighted by the second.
Mhm.
Did you have any mental health support at that
Oh,
time?
yes, I had to because I think that's, besides my son, probably that saved my life as well because I was in a horrible downward spiral.
Yeah.
And I actually quit my job completely at that time because it was too stressful
Yeah.
and I didn't know what to do. And I was like, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to practice in um, and not tell anyone where I am, and maybe people will show up, but I hope not. And then I opened and I had a 6-month waiting list.
Oh, geez.
So it didn't really work out. It didn't really work out, Carrie, but like I actually did. So I saw a mental health professional for a very long time, and I periodically check in now, but that's part of the journey that I learned. Like running for me, and I think it is for a lot of people, it was a way to escape things I didn't want to address in my mental and emotional self. And I would push things down. And when it was my only way to manage stress. And so through this, in the most stressful period of my entire life, I lost my only coping mechanism.
Right.
And so I had to have mental health help. And what they taught me and what I learned is that you have to have a toolbox. So I tell my runners now, and everybody they ever work with, and again, the reason I'm building Run Source is because you have to have a toolbox, because at some point you are not going to be able to run. And it could be for a week because you sprained your ankle. It could be for a month because of something else. It could be for a year because of a stress fracture in your femur, or it could be forever because it's something like I have. But at some point, you have to understand you have to have other tools. Otherwise, you're going to spiral. So that lesson was incredibly helpful to me and my growth as a person, because if I didn't have that mental health support, I would have been in serious trouble.
Yeah, no, I think anybody that if somebody takes running off the table and that's your jam, that's how you get through. And that's why I think it's such a relevant conversation if you work with athletes who run, and us specifically, postpartum and pregnant women who run. That is what is the go-to for a lot of providers. Like, oh, well, just don't run, or just don't do this, or just don't do that. And if that's how you cope with life,
yeah, you're taking away a crutch or a mechanism that somebody has cultivated for a very long time to help them through stress and their life. And so I treat runners, and I actually just had a postpartum runner yesterday. That was, I know, it's so fun. So I don't do, I'm not a pelvic health therapist. I don't do internal work, but I do like all the other stuff. And then I send, I have pelvic health therapists that I send to for the internal work. And we work together a lot because of my running background in biomechanics. But anyway, from that perspective, she came to me, and the reason she came to me is she had her first baby. We worked together, and she felt, one, supported. Someone actually understood what running meant to her. And I didn't ever tell her she was crazy, because she's not. And I didn't tell her she had to stop running. Now, yes, there are all these things. We need to have a return to run screen after for postpartum. There should be walk before you run. You need to be strong. You definitely need to see a pelvic health professional somewhere in that 8 to 12 weeks. I don't know if you have a different timeline, but that's kind of where I put people if they're doing the breath work and all the other stuff first.
Yeah.
So, I don't know where I was going with that, but
you have a plan and you have people who listen. No, I love that. I mean, it's, and again, I mean, I think you kind of working in this population, having gone through it yourself, like I feel like we have so many more resources now and people that are versed in that, but it does make a difference to work with someone who understands that need to be back out there and put your shoes on again, and what that means to your identity, especially when, as a new mom, you're trying to navigate who you are when you have this little, like, symbiont now or whatever, like this little thing that's like latched to you all the time. And you're trying to figure out who you are other than mom, or find your former self. I'm seeing moms actually a lot sooner now. So I'm seeing them 2 to 4 weeks after delivery, but just to do a lot of the basic stuff. And so that when they come in at 6 weeks, we screen at 6 weeks, but they've already been doing stuff at that point. And then we use that screen now to be like, all right, let's give it a little bit longer. Let's make sure you're walking, a certain amount, stroller carry, whatever it is, without symptoms. Let's dive into those deficits, because that's where I think you as an orthopedic PT totally know that ankle issues, like moms that go back to running without doing any other strengthening, shin splints usually knock them out before anything else, like all this stuff. Like if we can get that stuff cleaned up, then we don't have to worry about it when we get to that walk run program, then it's a lot easier. We kind of, we get a pre-baseline, a baseline, and then just like we're nice and solid moving forward. But again, to your point, having somebody that listens and doesn't tell you, no, just don't run or just don't do this or don't do that, that gets it, that understands it, I think is such an incredibly important, I don't know, just like person to have on your team.
I think so too. And I think I have probably a different, I have got this incredible setup here in Atlanta where like you see people around 3 to 4 weeks. So what we do is I see people at 3 to 4 weeks and I do visceral, I look at scar tissue, I work on breathing and rib cage mobility and do all of that. And then so that they have touch points. And I see them a few weeks later, and then I send them to someone like Blair or another public health therapist. I think it's probably, we're saying the same thing,
similar,
but it's just, or similar, but it's the way that I just, and I don't know, like, again, I don't do internal work. So,
but that's where I'm really like, you need to get yourself a real-time ultrasound. I'm just going to put that one out there for
my God, I know. Someone just sent me stuff. I know.
I've been really lucky. I had a colleague, oh my gosh, it's probably like 15, 16 years ago now, that was from Australia. He brought it with him, was standard of practice. And so when I opened my practice, I brought it over. And again, it makes it really easy to not be invasive, but still get that information, still make sure that, we're working on motor strategies and stuff like that too. But I think we're saying the same thing of like, let's get touch points early. Let's problem solve sooner than later. Let's make sure that there's a clear path forward if they've got issues with pelvic floor and that kind of stuff. I think when we know where we're going and you're not just flailing, it makes such a difference. And it makes it clear to be like, oh yeah, I am going to get back to running, instead of, no, I just can't run right now. And I don't know when I'm going to be able to again. Like that's not.
And the plan is the best, and especially for a runner mindset. And so part of because we train by plans. That's what we do. So it's really important to have that plan and to have the people you trust along the way. And then I'll take it a step further. I also do gait retraining and gait analysis early on, like as early as I can. So once they've done their walking for about 30 minutes, multiple times, they're out there and they're passing the return to run screen, or they're going through, or they're almost passing it, I might start to look at their run gait. And then I break down their biomechanics and look at their run gait and compare that to their return to run screen. And then we can build out the program even further from there.
Yeah, no, I love that too. And I love being able to give moms feedback. I mean, even just a simple, if you don't have the big setup in your clinic, even just having them watch themselves. And the analogy I've really kind of enjoyed lately is like a baby giraffe or a baby deer. And that's kind of what they feel like. That first, I've got a little alley out here that I will run with them 90 seconds. And they're like, oh, wow. Okay. Cause they're like, oh, am I ready to go? And I'm like, okay, well, let's go do this together. And they're like, oh, I'm like, you feel like a baby deer, don't you? I'm like, yep. And then they'll go back, kind of work on stuff, and then come back, watch themselves again and see what it feels like. And they're like, wow, that's really different just in a matter of weeks. And again, you get them being like, yeah, okay, this is why I waited this long. Because I don't want to be running and feeling like a baby giraffe and you're all over the place, and plus your boobs are, wherever.
Huge. They're huge and leaky and whatever else.
Yeah, get the bra. I'm working on getting, I forget who told me about her, a researcher that does breast dynamic studies.
Oh, I've heard about her. I've heard about her. I don't, yes, because yes, of course.
So this person's retired. She's moved me on to the next person, but we're going to try and get her on the show. But I'm like, oh my God, I am fascinated. As someone that went from A to a C back to an A, like I want to know all things boobs and bras and recommendations and stuff like that.
I mean, we don't talk about that stuff. No. At least, I mean, the truth is now the pelvic floor discussion is not as taboo, but people don't talk about boobs. And let me tell you, it hurts. They're huge. They're leaky. They're like all the things. And I had to wear 2 sports bras and stuff those things. The pads. The pads in your bra, like all the stuff. And I still went out there, which And of course I went out too early, even though I wrote the book after I had a baby.
Okay, so you brought it up. Let's dive right in. There was a lovely segue there. Like, okay, so you write this book.
Yeah.
And how much of it is what I learned as a mom, and how much of it is what I know academically and clinically? Like, how much of a book like that literally the title of is Go Ahead, Stop and Pee, like, how much is a mashup? Like, what are we talking here? We're talking 50-50, we're talking 40-60. How much is you and how much is professionally?
There's a lot of me in there, but it's because it was the first book of its kind. It's not that old, but it feels like it's old based on, everything that's
It
happened.
does, doesn't it?
It feels
Yeah.
really old. I think it feels old.
Because it came
So
out when? How I
I
can't
think 2019.
which in some time like in math, you're like, "Oh, that's not that bad." But like it
But in
literally
our world,
it seems like forever ago that you were here in DC and you guys were doing your media tour. I was like, that was another lifetime.
I know it was 2019, and so we wrote what we wanted was for the book to be user friendly for healthcare professionals, but also just mom wanting
Yep.
to do it. So it's basically a guide. That's what it is. So we wrote our stories. I tell about my birth story, like how I personally did not want to be pregnant and hated it, every second of it. And I told about how like I got a stress fracture because I wasn't listening and all the things, right? So we tell our stories in the beginning, but then we break it down 2 sections, pregnancy and postpartum. And we talk about how your body changes, because for me, I think education, and I mean, it's so cheesy, but education is power, right? So if you understand how your body changes, then you can wrap your mind around why it takes a while after you have a baby to get back. So we take you through that academically, but then we throw in some things and we tell you what to do. We give you exercises, all the things. And then we take same thing with postpartum. We say what happens during pregnancy. Here are all the things that could come up in terms of injuries. And then here's how we deal with them. And there was even a couple of return to running programs at the back of the book, I think. So yeah, it's a guide, but it has stories.
Which I like. I mean, I'm one of those people, I need to be entertained when I learn. It's just, and I also think, when you hear that you're learning something from somebody that understands kind of where you're coming from, it makes a difference. But I was just thinking like 2019, like that's when the UK guidelines came out. Like I really feel like that in sport period. And I'm lucky enough that I spend, part of my life in running, part of my life in CrossFit and other areas and that sort of thing, that there are a lot of parallels between the two. But I really feel like running has sort of led the way and like,
Mhm.
hey, let's do some screening here. Let's have a process. And I think a lot of that has to do with so many of us have spent so much time in sports and orthopedics and return to sport
Mhm.
from injury and trying to create that, similar pathway,
Yeah.
and just translating it and bastardizing it over into pregnancy and postpartum with as much research as was out there at the time. And now like it's not even it's 4 years later and it's just
Mhm.
so much has changed. So that really, that was such a pivotal year, I think, in kind of being like, all right, let's kick this thing in the butt as far as running goes with moms.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and that article came out right as our book was about to be published. So
I remember.
we talked to Emma and Grenier. We
Yeah.
talked to them about it, and we were totally aligned, which was really
Yep.
good. That the book actually was like the guidelines
Yep.
that they gave were what we had come up with in the book too.
Yes.
That was really, we were so grateful for that, and that we were on the same page. But we had
Yep.
talked to them right before, and then
Yep.
continue to talk to them now. So pretty incredible.
It's it's again like these lovely moments. I remember when it came out, not I knew who Tom Goon was. I didn't know who Grunion and Emma were. Um, but I remember before that, I was bastardizing. There was like, I can't remember his name. Um, he was a PT that used to be at like VCU or something, and now is like with Nike or something like that. And he had like
Not
there's
Jay.
now
Is it Jay?
no, it's
No,
not Jay.
not Jay. Who is it?
It'll come to me
Who is
when we
it?
get off.
Yeah.
But he's now with Nike or something like that. And he had done a 5-point readiness screen for orthopedic stuff. And he presented it at like CSM in New Orleans or something.
Mhm.
You know who I'm talking about? And I
Yeah,
can't
I do. I
remember.
cannot remember his name, but yeah.
But it was like basic stuff. And I remember being like, I need something because there was nothing.
There was nothing.
And parts of that I think had translated over into kind of both the stuff that you guys were thinking of, but I thought it was the coolest thing that you get people that didn't talk about this stuff because again, we didn't chat about this on social media. It wasn't like these conversations weren't openly happening in the public. Like we were thinking similar things, but it comes from people being like, okay, there's a gap. We need to fill it with something. Let's pull what we've got and then move from there. But I think that set the space and the tone for the conversations that we're having now
Yeah.
for, Christine to have her book out and be like, hey, this is a history of how we got into this shit show. Like, that kind of stuff. And this is where I'm going to make a jump over into CrossFit world. I don't know if you know Christina Previtt. She's a geriatric PhD, but tons of stuff and doing a lot with barbells and CrossFit moms and that sort of thing. And because she has this PhD background, she's like, before we can talk about the changes and how we're going to set up how to do these things in pregnancy and postpartum, we have to, in its basic research, it's like, this is what's out there. This is what moms are doing out there. We need to show that there is a big ass gap between, sedentary pregnancy recommendations and lifting 10 pounds and moms that are in pregnancy lifting well over, 200 pounds and that sort of thing. Okay, this is what's happening. There's a gigantic gap. Now we move forward. And I think, unfortunately, that's the whole process of if we're going to get this research, we have to acknowledge moms are doing far more. Moms are racing marathons while pregnant. Moms are doing halves. Moms are, professional moms are returning to training at, shorter than 12-week timelines. Like we've got to establish these norms now, what the recommendations are. And there is a huge gap between the two. And there's a need to fill that gap.
I agree wholeheartedly. And one of the things that we do have to think about when we are entering that space is who the people are that are doing those things and the kind of support they also have. So it is not it's not a great idea for me to compare myself to say like a Kara Goucher, because she's my age, right? So like a Kara Goucher coming back from pregnancy, because and maybe it's a bad example because she did not have a support at all. No, but like I guess that's a really bad example. But like what I'm saying is like
somebody who's elite coming back to postpartum.
Is elite coming back to postpartum from my team has me now.
Right.
And they get access to me all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they can call me anytime. I see them at least once a week, if not more. Like that's a very different situation than a mom who is not on an elite team that maybe didn't train as much as that person the entire time. So the guidelines are built for one group of people and they're not built for everybody. And so we need to kind of figure out. So what we do is we kind of piecemeal figure out where our athlete specifically fits within those guidelines. And a lot of times they will pass the return to run screen so much earlier.
Right.
And if they do that and their nutrition and their sleep is in check, and I know that they're not really at a huge disadvantage from like an energy availability standpoint, then we'll probably start earlier. But they have the support to do that.
Yes. No, that's a wonderful point. And referring to Red S back there, which again, that conversation's come a long way in the last year or two. And, the number of women in pro running that have had a history of stress fractures pre and postpartum, I think we have a lot more to dive into there. But to your point, I think accessibility to information is so incredibly important. I grew up in an incredibly rural area. I was DMing with a mom yesterday who she's like, there's nobody for an hour and a half. And I was like, aha, that sounds like where I'm from. She's from where I'm from. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, okay, so I understand what you're talking about here. And she's like, there's nobody here that understands. And I'm really feeling hopeless. And that's where I think to have access to virtual coaching, to have access to online programs, to have access to, and that's for me, putting so much information out on social media is part of my why, because I did not grow up in a place like, if you've got broadband, I want you to feel like you've got something or somebody you can ask a question to, understanding I'm not your, providing medical advice. I'm providing,
Right.
basic information, but it's one of those things that I think as PTs, we've got to be much better at thinking about how we provide information and meeting our patients where they are. Because, I mean, both of us are in pretty interesting areas where a lot of people have access to a lot of things. But I think we're also both aware that there's plenty of places in this world, because we're a global community now, where people don't.
Yeah.
But that should not limit your ability to get back to running. So
No, I completely agree. And again, like that's why I'm building out RunSource. I'm taking, and you're an expert for it, but the app is coming out in a few weeks, actually. So I'm transferring everything. So originally, anyway, it's a whole story, but we're putting it on an app, so it'll be a little bit, I realized people needed even more guidance than I originally thought. Like, so like you'll be able to go on the app and say, I'm this kind of runner and this is my goal in the next 8 weeks. So if you're like, I don't know, like I'm a weekend warrior, but I am postpartum, then you're going to be dropped into a return to postpartum, which is with programming, but that's like videos from experts like you, videos from experts like Grania or Emma, videos from like giving you the information about energy availability, giving you ideas about recipes and meditations and mental health, and also what you should do to what the screen is if you're ready. And then here are the exercises and breath work you need to be doing to get prepared. So I'm putting that together. It's not going to be perfect because individual assessments are always best if you can see somebody. But the reason I built it is because I'm from a small town too. And there's nobody that does anything like that anywhere. And so I brought together experts from across medicine to help different factions of runners. Post-pregnant and postpartum is only one of them, but to help curate so that you get the right information.
Yeah. And that's so important again. And I mean, I think you get the assignment there. Like, I have a theory that, a third of the people will be fine no matter what. And a third of the people, if you give them good general information, are going to do great. And then you have those people that, hey, you've kind of jumped through those hoops. You're still not where you need to be. This is where we need to dive into that individualized care. But I think there's so many people that can benefit from, hey, let me help kind of guide you through this pathway based on some of the information that they can provide, and just get them further than they would if they had to DIY the whole scenario. Like, there's just no reason to anymore. Like, too many of us know too many things. And so to create a platform like that, like I'm an app form too, like everything's going that way, as much as I hate all the apps on my phone.
I hate it too. And honestly, like I created this and we've got hundreds and hundreds of videos from experts already on our website at Fast Bananas. But it's overwhelming is the problem. And so like an app makes it easy and organizes it. And so that's why we're transitioning. But, yes, I think that's just the world that we're in, and we have to do it and we have to change. And I'm just excited to be able to do it because like it's exactly, I'm going to have my elite athletes use the app too, because they can say I'm an elite athlete and this is my goal. And they're going to have information that they still don't even know.
Right. No, I love that, because to your point again, like, how do you take all the stuff that we know now and how do we get it to the right people at the right time? And it's a lovely kind of culmination of as far as we've come in the medical profession, but also how we've learned how to learn and translate information and get efficient about it. And not everybody needs to know all the things. You want to know what you want right now, because nobody has an attention span anymore.
Oh my God, I know. So in the beginning, by the way, some of the videos, so some of the first videos, like the one with Blair and I, one is like 20 minutes long. They're
No, 2 minutes.
1 to 3 max. You know what I mean? So the videos are very short now, but there's a couple that'll be on there that are like really long. Or I've said to my editor, hey, we need to chop these up. Because
if you just divide it. Yeah. So for those of you that have gotten this far in the episode, thank you for doing it. I used to be a little bit shorter, but it's hard to have kind of like these big fun conversations. So now they're more like run length. So if you did your warm up, you did your run and you did your cool down. Yes, warm up and cool down are important, ladies.
Yes,
My God, that's a conversation I have daily.
they
Then this will be the perfect. And so thank you for listening this far. And I always listen to podcasts on faster mode too.
Oh yeah.
So I'm always surprised when people actually talk. I feel like they're talking in slow motion when it's really their normal voice. Anyway, all right. At the end of every episode, I ask a few questions. So let's start with this one for you. Any book you're reading or podcast you're listening to right now?
So I read like 3 to 6 books a month.
You're my girl.
Because I just can't, my brain doesn't stop. But I think the one I'm reading now, I'm reading a book called Flow right now. Have you read Flow?
Oh, I've heard of it. I don't think I've read that one.
It's really good. It's about, it's more towards that kind of, it's about timing and hormones and a female body and how the world is not structured for women. It's structured for men, but then taking that structure and figuring out how to build your world around your hormonal cycle. And it's for anybody that has a period or is in, perimenopause or menopause, whatever. But it's really interesting. So that's the book that I am touching right now out of the others. I'm multiple ones.
Awesome. I'm going to have to check that one out. All right. You have a 9-year-old. Favorite activity since becoming a mom?
Snuggling.
Yes, which is getting less and less. We were talking about this. Fortunately, my son is like a big carnival teddy bear right now, and I'm going to take every minute of it. He still tells me I love you when he gets out of the car in the morning.
I know, and Andy, I get he's still holding my hand when we walk to the bus, and I just can't even it is my favorite.
So for those moms that are like, oh my God, if I have to hold this hand one more time, there's a day that it goes away.
Yeah. And today he almost didn't. So I know it's coming very soon.
It's when they pull it away. That's when it's just like, it's a dagger to your heart when you go to reach for them and they pull it away because they don't want their friends to see.
Oh my God. I hope I don't cry in front of him.
Okay. No. Sunglasses, big sunglasses. Okay. One piece of advice for new moms.
Yes. Have a plan, find somebody that I'm serious, have a plan and find someone that you trust. Like when you are pregnant, find your people for when after you're pregnant. And if, like we talked about, it could be someone you really love online. It could be someone who you can go to in person, but there's so much information out there. And there's a lot of great information. There's a lot of really poor information. So do your research and know who your team is going to be.
Yeah. And don't pass out during runs. And if you do, find a sports cardiologist who
listen to your body.
That's my takeaway.
Listen to your body and know your signs.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Your red and yellow flags are.
Yes, but like hopefully nobody's like, oh my God, I'm having palpitations now. Like, hopefully this is rare. It's
very rare. I want everyone to know it's very rare.
Okay, good. All right. Who is someone, and I'll adapt this for you, pregnancy, postpartum space, even running space right now? Like who's got your attention right now?
That's a great question, Carrie. I think if I'm honest, I am so heads down in my project right now.
It's okay.
That
it's a tech person, isn't it? You're in love with a tech person right now.
I'm in love with the person building my app, and I have Presley Weems as a professional athlete, but also my employee. And I'm in love with Presley because she is helping me with everything that I can't handle on my own.
Okay. And that means a lot for sure. So Presley, thank you. We love you. All right. Well, when you come up for air, I'll ask you the question again.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
All right. Last one. What does it mean to you to be an active mom in postpartum?
Freedom. I think it means freedom and being able to connect with who you are as a person, not just as a mom. Yeah. So being able to be active allows you to be yourself.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your story and kind of advocating for women athletes, just period. And kind of getting those resources out there as much as you have been. If you guys want to know more about Kate, you can find her at Fast Bananas Run and at Precision PT _ATL. Thank you, Kate Edwards, so much for being on the show, and hopefully we'll be together in person soon
I
again.
hope so. And thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks. Did you enjoy the podcast? If so, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and tell a friend to do the same. Are you a postpartum mom or postpartum pro wanting to know more about getting back to running after baby? Check out all my free goodies on carriepagliano.com. This podcast represents the opinions of Dr. Carrie Pagliano and her guests to the show. The content should not be taken as medical advice and is for entertainment purposes only. Always consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions.